Welcome to Let's Talk Ball. I'm Thad Brown along with Carl Jones. Every week we watch the All 22 film. We let it drain into our eyeballs and digest it, let it sink down into our soul. Only though, because it was Bills and Ravens. Bills and Jets, man, we just watch that thing and forget about it. This week, though, was a great watch. There was lots of fun stuff to talk about. And Carl, the thing that I came away with overarching, the top point from this game, both sides of the ball, was I think the better roster lost the game, but I think the best team won the game. And the Bills did enough things right to overcome what might have been personnel differences.
Yeah, when you talk of team, and it's not just the players on the field, you look at upstairs as well, whether it was Bobby Babbage calling a good game to put his guys in the best situation to succeed, Joe Brady on the other side as well, and then as well as Sean McDermott, for what all you can say about motivation and things before the game and saying, oh, this stuff ticked us off, too big, too small, whatever the case may be, having his guys in the right frame of mind to go out there and win a game on Sunday, all of that stuff speaks to the team win that happened on Sunday.
Yeah, and we'll talk about some of that motivational stuff. I think it played a big part in this. But let's start on offense. And the question all week, and the Bills, you talk about motivation. They let us know that they were listening to all the talk, all the media about whether they would be big enough. And the thing that impressed me the most about this Bills offensive game is that not only were they big enough, they were really the bullies. When they needed to finish off drives, they just handed the ball off or gave it to Josh Allen. And it was like a force of nature. The Ravens had no answers. It wasn't like the Bills got down inside the 5 and pounded it 7 times with penalties. I mean, the first drive of the game is 7, 8, 6, 4, 1-yard touchdown. When they get the pass interference penalty end of the first half, they're at the 12-yard line like 25 seconds to go. Run for 4, run for 4, run for 4. I mean, the stat sheet makes it look easy as pie. You watch it on film, you know it wasn't, because this was large men winning physical battles against equally large men. And in some cases, it was the quarterback. Carl, I was really, really impressed.
They ran jumbo, 6 offensive lineman personnel, bringing Alec Anderson onto the field on 22% of their snaps. That's not some high rate that they haven't done before. But against a team like the Ravens, who pride themselves on stopping the run and being the big bad bullies on the block, for this Buffalo Bills team to do that, it's kind of like crazy to think about. Think back to 2020 when they were spread out, throwing the ball all over the yard. 2021, even last year and the year before that as well. And this year, and I know Sean McDermott has spoke about since he's been in Western New York, want to establish the line of scrimmage, run the rock, be a balanced offense. I think now is kind of like his ideal situation where, like, hey, we got our cyborg quarterback. He can make enough plays in the passing game. But at our core, we want to show you that we're tough. And they showed it on Sunday. I mean, whether it was Ray Davis on the perimeter, James Cook, who we spoke about ad nauseum on this platform about how he's getting so much better at yards after contact, Ty Johnson making some plays, and then break glass in case of emergency, 17 doing it himself. All of that just spoke to the toughness that they showed, especially in the first half.
James Cook has gone up a level from the level he went up earlier in the year, late in the season. And he's playing like a running back who goes 6'3", 250, like the guy on the other side. And maybe not to that level, but regardless, he's playing a lot bigger than his frame. The guys who impressed me the most in this, maybe not surprisingly, two of the biggest guys in the offensive line, Spencer Brown had a fantastic game. I mean, he had a couple of duo blocks, grabbing a tackle at the line of scrimmage, getting down to the linebacker over and over, just executing. I thought O'Cyrus Torrence had his best game, at least as a run blocker with the Bills, considering the opposition. On the flip side, Connor McGovern wasn't great. He really had his hands full with Michael Pierce and whatever defensive tackle the Ravens wanted to throw. Travis Jones also. So he was the weak spot. But in general, this offensive line was really, really good. Thing is, Carl, and one thing you wanted to point out here, this game plan the Bills operated with the run game and kind of shortening the game, the margin for error was not super large.
Yeah, it's a really thin line, right? Where you're limiting possessions on purpose. You're basically saying, hey, superstar quarterback Josh Allen, we're going to take away maybe 1, 2 possessions out of your possession out of your hands at the end of the game because we want to, I don't want to say drain the clock, but play ball control ball and keep that super historic offense off the field the best that we can. And it worked for the most part in the second half. They tried it as well. It did work on the second to last drive of the game where they were able to get a field goal out of it. But the rest of the second half, they really weren't able to implement that game plan as much. But it's a thin line. It's a real thin line because remember, even last year against Kansas City in the divisional round, it was some of the same type of stuff. I think some of that had to do with the fact they couldn't really pass the ball as efficiently as they wanted either. Stephon Diggs wasn't winning as much as they wanted, and Gabe Davis didn't play either. But regardless, I think the same ideas were popping up there. But it's a thin line. And I don't know if that same exact idea or approach to the game will work this upcoming Sunday or even a Super Bowl game either. But for this game on Sunday, I actually like the idea of saying, you know what? We think 8 over there and what he does over there is really dynamic. Let's not even mess around and give him 9, 10 possessions.
To be fair, there's a lot of schemes and plans and ideas that are going to look good when you force 3 turnovers and are up 11 points at halftime. I mean, that makes a lot of things work a whole lot easier. One thing that we're both a little concerned about, and we should not overreact to one play, but the Amari Cooper comeback route that was so far off was concerning enough that I'm going to bring it up here, even though it was one play. I might also be concerned because I lost a couple of units on Amari Cooper on Sunday. Regardless, though, this is a veteran receiver who one of the first things he said when he came in was, "Yeah, no problem. I'll learn the playbook. I've done it before. I've been traded before. I'll get right on the same page." And we're now here 3 months after that trade, and they don't look anywhere close to on the same page. Now, some of it is because Cooper is not being used anywhere near like a number one receiver, not with the route tree, not with the number of reps, not with the number of targets. He has had moments for sure. The other Chiefs game is the one that'll stick out for everybody. But can the Bills get away with ball control, run game, and not really have anything down the field other than the occasional Khalil Shakir flash play and win 2 more games, the 2 hardest games of the season? I have concerns about that, even though the Bills have dominated the 2 best run defenses in the NFL the last 2 weeks.
Once again, it's a thin line you're trying to thread there. But you're right, the route itself was concerning. I was also concerned because that was the most glaring, I think, mismatch going into the game on paper, at least, with Amari Cooper up against a Trey White or any outside receiver against a Brandon Stevens or even a Trey White, maybe even Nate Wiggins. So I think it's better than what people think. But regardless, going into the game, we all thought the Bills had a distinct advantage on the outside and didn't present that self last Sunday. I don't think it'll be the case the rest of the way. That's where I'm like, if there was an opportunity for those guys to show up and show out, they would have did it. So I don't know how much they really truly have in the tank in that department of their game plan.
All right, let's go to the defensive side of the ball where the Bills created a lot of splash plays, and even splash feels like extreme, but there were enough big plays, winning plays, I think is the best way to call it, to get away with this. But for me, the guy who was a microcosm of this defensive game plan for the Bills was Terrell Bernard, because he forced the gigantic fumble at the end of the game. He had a couple other really big plays I'll talk about in a minute. But other than that, he was borderline bad in this game. On the first drive of the game, he's the one that gets caught ridiculously out of position on the play action where Derrick Henry had, if he catches the ball, probably a walk-in touchdown. He's the one that's, now look, he's trying to play defense, pass defense late in the down against Rashad Bateman, which ain't a good matchup, but he gets way out of position. Even on the fumble, even on the Mark Andrews play, Carl, what is 43 doing running over next to Cole Bishop and leaving a third of the field wide open for Mark Andrews to make that catch? Beyond that, we talked about the size issues. There were a couple times where, and this is not an exaggeration, Terrell Bernard in run defense looked like a couple socks you throw in the washing machine, just get flipped around like they have no control where their body is. He was having trouble physically matching up. But yet, after saying all that, Terrell Bernard saved the game at the end by making the fumble. Make sense of this for me, Carl.
I can't make sense of it, but you know what? That was kind of like the high variance game that all of the Bills brought to the table, quite frankly. Damar Hamlin made a few big plays. You're like, man, he had the game of his life. And you watch it back, you're like, all right, well, the deep ball to Rashad Bateman that Rasul Douglas tackled, I believe, the 2-yard line, that was Damar Hamlin not being in his zone and being the deepest of the deep. There were a couple other plays where I'm like, number 3, I think I need you to be here. But I think that kind of spoke to how Bobby Babich on down, Sean McDermott including that, kind of approached this game where they're saying, if I'm going to bring this to a boxing analogy real quick, they were up against a Ravens team that can throw a hook, haymaker, all that good stuff, but they got a little bit of a vulnerable chin. So if you're the Bills, you're like, you know what? I'm going to match the same energy. I'm going to throw the same haymakers, and you might catch me with a few, but if I catch you with an uppercut, I'm going to test your chin, and I think you're going to drop a few times. And that's exactly what happened last Sunday. Yeah, the Ravens are going to hit you with a couple haymakers. They're going to hit you with some big plays. They got too many good players for that not to happen. But they chin, they discipline, they turnover propensity. They lived in that world, and it worked to perfection. Even though, like, if you look at the grade scale, it's probably a C across the board because you got some A's and some F's on any given play.
I believe your boxing to football analogies need to be on a website somewhere so I can reference them at any time because they're fantastic. It's exactly right the way you described it. And look, you want to talk about high variance and the way the Bills attack this game. Go right to the game plan. They blitzed the Ravens at a rate higher than Sean McDermott has done in 3 years or whatever it was. I know you have the stat off the top of your head. You can say it in a minute if you want. The thing I like the best about the way Bobby Babich attacked this game wasn't even an X and O thing. It felt like early this team had energy, and that was to me the big reason why they were able to shut down the run game for the first like 4 or 5 snaps. Doesn't seem like much, but that was a couple possessions. And by the time that the Ravens got things figured out, it's 14-7, 21-10, and they're playing catch up the rest of the way. Now, look, that game was 70 minutes long. The Ravens probably win, but it wasn't. It was 60. The Bills did what they had to do. And when it comes to being a defensive coordinator, X's and O's aren't the extent of the job. It's motivation too. And I don't know if it's Sean McDermott or Bobby Babich, but somebody had that D line ready for bear the moment that game started, and it allowed the Bills to take control early. I thought that was a big deal.
I'm happy you brought that point up because I remember during my playing days, our coaches would always say, like, hey, all the juice and motivation that you bring to the game, that runs out after like the first 3 drives. After that, you come back to your technique and your preparation. Well, that's really all the Bills needed to get the win. They came out on those first 3 drives, quite frankly, the first quarter and a half of that game where they took it to Baltimore, and that bought themselves enough time to where the Ravens, where all the juice came down, all the motivation kind of went out the window, and it came back to the X's and O's. But at that point, the Bills were too far in front and head and came out with the win.
End of the game, Ed Oliver had a couple of good moments. We've talked a lot through the year about his ability to impact games and the Bills' need for him to do so. I didn't think he was much impactful, maybe the first 2.5 quarters, but late in the game, he made some plays. And really, you talk about landing those uppercuts. Well, Ed Oliver had a couple. Daquan Jones had one. Jordan Phillips had one. Austin Johnson had 1 or 2. AJ Epinesa. By the way, I don't know if anybody noticed this. The second down play after that Rashad Bateman catch, that's a tackle eligible. That's what the Ravens were trying to run there. AJ Epinesa spotted it, covered the tackle leaking, and helped take that play away. It turned into a Greg Rousseau sack. So everybody got their swing in. It wasn't a lot of them, but multiple guys connected at least once in the game. Another thing, going back to the blitzes, this was something that stood out. Among the different things that Sean McDermott and Bobby Babich did, they went 3 linebacker more than they ever have. They went out of nickel more than they ever have, and they blitzed a lot more than they ever have. And look, Lamar got him on a few, but it also created some big plays for the Bills.
When you think of the 3 turnovers, the first interception, the deep ball, Matt Milano, whether it was a design blitz or he saw Derrick Henry staying, I think it was a design blitz because he kind of triggered too fast for it to
I thought
be
design.
green.
Yeah, I had it down as design blitz. Yeah.
In that situation, even if you don't think that impacted the throw, it's man coverage on the back end, which makes Lamar Jackson have to be perfect to drop a 30-yard plus corner route on the money.
Because they don't have receivers that can win like that. You're right.
Exactly. Zay Flowers not in the game, and then outside of Zay, not a lot of ball winners out there. The Damar Hamlin play where looks like a blitz. I know bad fumble, bad snap, or whatever. But once again, when you blitz, when you bring the pressure, you turn the variance up. And the variance turned out in their favor on that play. And then the Mark Andrews play, that's just a guy being a player. So those were the plays that you needed. Even when you think of, and I know they didn't bring pressure here, but when Matt Milano kind of green dogs and finally attacks Lamar Jackson on the third and goal to force the field goal, just stuff like that where they took it to Baltimore instead of just waiting back and sitting back. Because quite frankly, on paper, they couldn't do that. I thought that was a very, very important detail that the Bills brought.
I mean, the Bills made the right call. We talk about it at the start of this discussion that the better roster probably lost, but the Bills said, all right, these guys might be better than us man for man. Let's, like you said, make it a high variance game and force them to execute. And the Ravens couldn't do it. They couldn't do it. The Bills executed at a better level and they made plays throughout the game. One of the things that stood out for me, and I want to, one of the plays that Terrell Bernard made, despite the rest where he had trouble. Did you notice the 1st and goal at the 2, going back to that big possession, end of the first half after the long Bateman catch, that Bernard basically throws his body at the legs of a pulling guard and a fullback and basically splashes both of them and shuts the play down for Derrick Henry? You don't see it a lot because you don't want your linebacker giving himself up with only 2 yards of real estate to cover. But it was a really smart play, and it just totally shut that play down. So wanted to point that out, was really impressed by it. One other thing from this game, the Bills secondary, and this has been a kind of a repeat thing, they got sliced open quite a bit in this game. And this is with weapons, like we said, that are not overly intimidating. Yeah, Lamar Jackson's good, but you should not have Tylan Wallace, did I even get the name right? Being able to run wide open throughout this game. And when the Bills face the Chiefs next week, and we're going to talk about this in a minute, going back to the last time the Bills played the Chiefs, you and I both saw there were receivers open left and right down the field. This problem has not gone away since that game back in early November.
And as of recording this on Tuesday, we don't know the health status of the Bills at this moment. But Taylor Rapp left that game on a cart. I know Sean McDermott said he's day to day, and then Christian Benford is currently in concussion protocol. Rapp didn't finish the game, so you can say like, oh, maybe that's the reason why there was some communication. Damar Hamlin was some communication issues. Damar Hamlin was the deep player on that play. That wasn't Cole Bishop on the deep Rashad Bateman play. They got to make sure they're on a string, and I get it. They use a game plan that they aren't as accustomed to, so you aren't going to be as sharp. Having said that, though, those are too many smart players on the field to have as many busts as they did.
And it was repeated. And it wasn't just DeMar. Rasul Douglas got worked a little bit. It was Terrell Bernard, like we said. So yeah, this to me is maybe the biggest problem going into this game against Kansas City. Let's talk about Bills Chiefs for all the AFC marbles. The first place that I start with this game is that Kansas City was the last defense that really did a good job shutting down the Bills' run game. I mean, they had 100, the Bills did 103 yards in that game, but a quarter of that was the 1 4th down scramble that everybody's seen a gazillion times from Josh Allen end of the game. They really took away the running back run option, and no one has done it since. Not Detroit, who we thought was good at it, not Baltimore, not Denver, who are ranked number 1 and number 2 in the NFL stopping the run. This is, to me, the A1 key to the game, certainly on offense for the Bills. Can they continue to run the ball? Because, yeah, they won that game against Kansas City, but they did it living in 3rd and long. And, you talk about small margin. Boy, you don't get any smaller than playing 3rd and 9 all night.
They went 9 for 15 on 3rd down. That you stretch that out for an entire year, that will be an NFL record by a long shot. That just doesn't happen at that rate. And I actually have the notes from that first game in front of me right now. The Bills ran 71 plays to the Chiefs 52. That goes to show you that a lot of those third downs, extended plays and drives that they probably had no business extending in the first place, because there was a lot of 3rd and 9s, 3rd and 11s, 3rd and 12s. You're right, James Cook didn't get going, but it was a lot of dink and dumping down the field. So that was their way of ball controlling and keeping the ball away from Patrick Mahomes. I'm interested to see what Steve Spagnuolo, claps back, and what's his rebuttal to that. Maybe he turns up the clock and says, we dare you to go down the field a little bit more often instead of just playing so passive on the back end. Some of that probably has to do with the fact that they were down their second starting corner in that matchup. Whatever the case may be, they brought a similar game plan to the Ravens that they played against the Chiefs. It was just dinking and dumping as opposed to running the rock.
I want to throw something at you here. We didn't talk about this in the pre-show, so y'all at home will excuse Carl if he's not totally 100% prepared for this. But the Bills in high leverage spots, especially, big time passing downs, only run 11 personnel. That's all they run now. 3 wide, 1 running back, 1 tight end. Now, the argument I'd make is if you want to put the best pass receiving personnel on the field, that's probably what you're going to do. But as someone obviously who's played at a high level and prepared at a high level, when you look at film and you're like, all right, anytime the game's on the line, the Bills are going to put this personnel on the field. What kind of an impact does that have when you're talking about what Steve Spagnuolo and the Chiefs are getting ready for this week?
Route combinations is the first and foremost. And I know down and distance plays more of a role in that than anything. But if it's 3rd and 6 and you know for certain it's 11 personnel, well, then the route trees, it can be whatever it is, because you got presumably 3 really good guys who can attack at all 3 levels of the field, and then 2 guys who can maybe hit the more intermediate, the short areas of the field. But anything less than that, 12P, as a defense, whatever you may think of Dalton Kincaid as a Bills fan or even a Bills offensive coach, I promise you defensive coaches aren't treating him like he's Brock Bowers. So they're going to maybe even be more aggressive in attacking him in the short area of the game. That's probably the main reason why, as they're saying in this 11 personnel stuff, because that's their best option to attack every angle of the field. But if I'm a DB and I see somebody come out in 12P, I'm sitting on everything. Like, I dare you to go deep, because that's just not how that formation presents itself.
Because 12 personnel is 2 tight ends, so there's less deep threats on the field. If they're in 11, you've got more deep threats. Maybe we're probably talking 2 guys, but what you're saying though is that when it's 11, you're going to probably have 1 route combo that's short, intermediate, deep, and then 2 essentially checkdowns, maybe not checkdowns, but shorts. You know,
Yeah.
so I guess it does. The impact would be it probably limits the amount of stuff you got to get ready for. And this doesn't mean the Bills are only ever an 11, but I know that like when I'm charting this game or every game, going back to maybe early December, when the Bills are third and gotta have it, it's almost always 11 personnel on the field. And I was just curious what you had to say about that one. Beyond that, the other two parts of this game that to me are very important are the two areas where the Bills utterly dominated in the first matchup that should be different this time around, just because the personnel will be different. And that's on the edges with Greg Rousseau attacking the tackles that were terrible in game one. Wanya Morris ain't even suiting up anymore, folks. So, you know, Greg Rousseau can't beat that drum in this rematch. Jawan Taylor on the other side still out there. He can go attack that guy all day, but it'll probably be Joe Tooney, who's an all-pro, playing left tackle. And then the second one is Jalen Watson, who will be back for game number 2 from one of the faster healing broken ankles you've ever heard of in your life, to be able to shore up what was a second corner spot, Carl, that the Bills equally abused back in the first game in November.
Speak of the high variance stuff with that world that the Bills lived in. Both Amari Cooper big plays were against Najee Johnson, who doesn't play right now. I believe he's their dime personnel player now. So he comes in when it's 3rd and 9 plus.
Yeah.
Yeah. But he was their second corner at that point in time, which Trent McDuffie on the other side. And the red laser treatment where it was fine 13, that's his jersey number. That's what Josh Allen did. So that won't be available to them. And Jalen Watson isn't Richard Sherman by any means, but he's a competent starting corner that allows the Chiefs to get into the exotic looks that they love to live in. But the Greg Rousseau point, I think, is the biggest one. Boy, Lord have mercy. I haven't seen him look like that outside of maybe the Broderick. What's the Steelers right tackle name that he was killing? Is it Broderick Jones?
Yeah.
That was crazy. And that's what it looked like. And as you should take advantage of someone. I remember that first matchup, but you were like, Wanya Morris, it wouldn't matter what happened. He's just too small. He didn't have the measurables to match up with Greg Rousseau. That won't present itself, but there are a bunch of areas. I know Keon Coleman, Kincaid, Spencer Brown didn't play, although I don't know if it was Vandermark who started at right tackle. It wasn't a crazy drop-off. So there are a bunch of new pieces in this game that it probably makes looking back at it a little difficult. But there's enough there to say, hey, I think these Saudi teams were going to attack each other.
I actually just posted this on X, and everybody at home can go find this too if you want. So here are the guys who did not play in Bills Chiefs round number 1. For the Bills, it was Matt Milano, Spencer Brown, Dalton Kincaid, Keon Coleman, Duane Smoot. For the Chiefs, it was Isaiah Pacheco, Hollywood Brown, Jalen Watson, Charles Omenihu, and Harrison Butker, the kicker. And then on top of that, like we said, the Chiefs had made a change at offensive tackle. So this game will look a lot different. Carl, I want to get your quick just reaction to, with those guys being out, what's your initial like, oh, that guy's back or that whatever. The one thing I'll say about it is if you want to group them, and I think if you're a fan, you're like, all right, well, who's getting more help, right? I think the Chiefs' 5 players have a higher floor. They're more dependable. They're guys who are going to be, I can count on them to be contributors in some way. The Bills players are the ones that have the higher ceilings. And Keon Coleman, Dalton Kincaid, I'm looking squarely at you fellas, that, yeah, they might have a big advantage because the athletic profile is there, but they really haven't been super effective late in the season. So counting on them, I think, will be tough.
A two-parter for this. Spencer Brown is by far the best player out of the 10 people that we
list. All 10. Yep.
But the drop-off wasn't crazy enough where his absence felt missed. But I think you hit it right on the head in terms of like, the Chiefs, they shore up some sore spots for sure. Left tackle was a massive issue. It's probably their biggest issue they've had the past 2 years. Cornerback 2 was a huge issue in matchup 1. Pacheco, I mean, I don't think he's kind of looked like his same version from last year. The kicker was no issue in the first matchup, so I don't think Harrison Butker is going to present some game-changing outcome. But if Dalton Kincaid can get a couple third down the fields that he can do, we've seen Keon Coleman, although it's few and far in between, that's a world that he can live in. I think if you can get those games out of those Bills players, those are the players you're going to miss.
One Keon Coleman 30-yard loss or pass interference penalty could send the Bills to the Super Bowl. That literally could be the difference. And of the 5 guys for the Chiefs, not one of them have that kind of level potential of making a big play. Maybe Pacheco, maybe Omenihu, if you want to talk about a sack fumble. He's got some chops there. But yeah, Coleman and Kincaid, and maybe even Milano for that point of view. I don't know if we've seen Milano at that level, but possibly, are the guys who are more likely to author the big time plays. All right, Carl, that was fun. Ravens, Chiefs, a lot to talk about. Anything else I missed before we shut it down here or no?
Nah, man, I just can't wait. I mean, we just got back from a heavyweight fight, and the Bills got to pick themselves up off the canvas and go once again on Sunday because they got a team over there that's been knocking them out the last few times.
Remember, it's carlsboxinganalogies.com. Go to the website. We're going to set it up a little later on. He'll have all these things listed so you can keep tracking, write them down for yourself. As always, you can check out Let's Talk Ball at rochesterfirst.com. You click on the sports tab, then you go to 8 Sports Extra. It's also at WIVB.com and wherever you get your podcast. Plus, we're on YouTube. Next week, we will talk Bills and Chiefs one way or the other. Somebody's going to be getting ready for a Super Bowl, but no matter what, Carl and I will be here breaking it all down. Thanks for watching and listening to Let's Talk Ball, and we'll talk to you next week.